Testing.
Testing. So what I was going to
Oh,
say is
go ahead.
like all this stuff is it's really interesting because it is about like it again, it's back to regressions, but it's like,
Mhm.
what do you care about? Right? In some cases, like in all this web stuff, it's yeah, have fun, Amanda. Um, in some stuff, you do care about just what's the visual part. And if you need to diff that, then as we saw, there's some things that you have to worry about, like an understanding or ignoring. Like here's a GIF and it's just slightly different because it's a different frame. Don't care. Here's some artifacts because of the text is being rendered to like a JPEG and there's some noise or whatever. Don't care. Here's something that's like totally in the wrong place, or like the button is too small and you need to care about accessibility. Oh, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
But there could be places where you do care about the DOM because you're like, there are different ways to get the same result, and what's the performance like? How does the browser handle it, right? Or can it show? Does it have to load everything and you get nothing until it's all done? This is like why tables are out of fashion, even for tabular data, right? Because you need the whole table before you can render anything. So people, as far as I understand, that's why people are like dibs as tables and then trying to do horrible things to like make it work in the way that just the table element would naturally do.
I,
But
I still use the table element.
I
I
use the
mean,
table element. The
yeah,
table
Don't
API
cancel
is
me.
Trevor's
super.
using the table element.
yeah. Well, I'm just
Tables are
I'm not
great
saying I
for
fully agree
table.
with it. The way it was explained to me is like the browser can't render the table until it's all the data is in there. So if you have a huge table, not good. Maybe
Yeah.
you should still use the table element and not have so much data there, you know.
Right.
But there are things like that where like you do care about the DOM because that is like what matters in this case. Um,
Y-
so there's also I was just gonna say like sometimes you just care about like in a non-visual aspect, like what is the answer that comes back from this function, from this whatever, but like maybe you care about the performance of it, like how long does it take to do that. So I mean, it's easy to say regressions, right? And that's what you're testing, but like what are you checking? Like what's the important thing? Um, and for me, again, it comes back to like refactoring, right? Because like I'm
Yeah.
always needing to like I do something that works, and then later I'm like, well, I mean, it got the right answer, but now it's like impossible to add to or change, or it's just not. So like I need to refactor it. And if all I care about is the answer that comes back, that's great. But if I care about how that is done to some degree, like how long it takes or how many queries it uses or whatever, then like there are different regressions to keep track of.
I think
Max.
oh,
Max
sorry,
raises
yeah,
her.
go ahead.
Yeah. What I
Shut
was
up.
gonna say is, like Casey, I've done snapshot testing, and it's for like visual stuff, and I've never had it be worth it because like the whole thing where it's like, well, I changed it to a span, don't fail, it looks the same. Where I where I do like React testing library, everything but the snapshot, and overall the idea of what is it, clicky pokey tests,
You can call them
where
whatever you want, okay?
React testing library does a really good job of it, where you have to find the elements in a way a user would. So like Wallaby lets you have, they also give you a backdoor where like you can find it either by like label name or whatever. You can also find it by CSS or whatever. And because of Wallaby, we have to do that more often than I want. Um, but the times where I do want to like check the DOM or whatever is when I've made components. And I don't have a ton of tests for this, but usually one or two, like especially when I'm doing anything with inputs, making sure that like, hey, the label is there and it is correctly associated with the input and stuff like that. And that's probably the only time I care, because otherwise you end up with, and I mean, I guess it is good to have. I don't know. A thing I always struggle with is like I can have an automated test for something that I've touched once and will hopefully never touch again, or I can just check it in the inspector, like a table component that renders out a table, right? Like there are things that I want to check about it. It's also going to get hit by a bunch of other tests, but like, do I need a test to go confirm that it is rendering out, a table element? No. Wallaby is a weird library. I like it in a lot of ways. I just wish it worked more.
We have some issues that come up with Wallaby that we don't have time for. Casey, what you were saying before I was rude to you.
Oh, that's that's quite all right. You were correct about the order of hands raised. Yeah, I think I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've heard anybody say this word yet in this conversation. And what we're kind of talking about, I feel like with all of this stuff is confidence. We want confidence in the software that we ship, and it's almost so reductive and so umbrella of a term as to not really be that useful, but that is what I'm thinking of when I'm making decisions about what tests to write and what tests to not write, and when is something like, when do I do the clicky pokey and when do I try to write some code that does the clicky pokey, and when is clicky pokey the wrong thing and it should be testing at like a lower level function level or something like that, or whatever. It's always the thing that I'm always trying to achieve is more confidence, and I feel like that's something that we get lost in the weeds a lot of times. Like, sometimes setting up these tests is so hard and so complicated that we get started down the path of doing it and lose sight of why we're doing, or like what is the value of it. Like we get into, and I think the example of like, we've got this long integration test, and as part of a bug fix story, we just add a couple lines to that existing test rather than taking a step back and thinking about a better place to put that test. And it's like, I don't know if that act increases your confidence in the system or in the code that you're maintaining. But anyway, I don't know. I didn't have like a strong central thesis there, but just like, that's confidence is sort of like the watchword that I keep in mind with all of this stuff.
Yeah, I think. Oh, Jonathan raised his hand.
Go ahead and finish your thought, and then
I was just gonna say,
put me in the queue.
I think, yeah, like it may be possible. Like it's interesting to think about it as confidence rather than coverage, because like it may be possible to get to 100% coverage, but like, is that really what you should be shooting for? And I don't think it's possible to get to 100% confidence unless you are really, really mistaken. Like,
It's definitely possible to be unearned confidence.
Yeah, and yeah, that is what you want, and like you want as high a confidence as possible, but you also don't want that false confidence that you can get with some of these things. To me, that's another part of like the London TDD is like, so like it's so like mockist, and so like based on all these things, and you're assuming all these things are connecting the way you say they do, but so that's kind of why I like the higher level integration tests and everything, because they help you be confident. Yeah, I think there's a lot that can be said there, but I actually was going to call on Jonathan soon anyway, because he mentioned something about related fun episode, but he probably raised his hand for something else.
Well, there's both. I wanted to go back to something you sort of just kind of named briefly, and it just kind of like triggered something that I've gotten out of tests that I mean, you could sort of call it like test-driven development, but it's more like with these integration specs, sometimes they actually can speed up development. You have a complicated, setup, and to do it manually, like, that's the other, and like to be able to set everything up and then like, inspect it in the browser, it can be a real pain sometimes to do that all by hand. And so you're sort of automating that process with a spec, and then you can just freeze the, what's really nice, of course, if, now that you can sort of have this Chrome driver and, you can pause it and you can play with the styles and tweak it and then, run it again quickly and it's all set up for you. So it's, it can serve a development feature. And then as a bonus, you're left with this sort of, you know, thing that captures a scenario that, will prevent regressions later on.
Yeah,
So
I've found myself in places where I'm like trying something, even for a spike, right? Or an experiment, and I'm like, okay, I have to, connect to the console, and here's my test, and I like fetch these three things, and I'm like, if I have, a Vim buffer open that I'm constantly copy pasting into another place for the console, is like I should at the very least write a script that does this, if not an actual test that will not only do the running, but the comparison to what I'm expecting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Yeah, so the thing that happened this past week, um, Amanda, we sort of got a suggestion from our designer to add a very simple CSS scroll behavior smooth. And it just kind of really nicely, just animates all of your scrolling. It's very convenient. And suddenly, like all of Amanda's tests were, I'm kind of giving away the punchline here because she didn't know like what had caused it, but suddenly all these specs were failing. And, finally, like I jumped on and I had experienced similar sort of things. And got a sense that, oh, like we were getting all these stale element errors from Capybara. And it's because, you'll click on something, but it's moved away. Well, it's actually anyways. And so it's suddenly like you were getting different kinds of interactions. You would click you would find a link and click on it. By the time you clicked on it, it had moved away and was clicking something else. And yeah, so we kind of just hacked and turned off that scroll behavior if you were in the test environment was just the simplest way to kind of avoid all of those complicated, scrolling issues. But again, it was kind of like that JPEG thing where like, or the GIF where, how do you control your tests when there's so many moving parts and variables and you're clicking on things and expecting things to show up at a certain time and it's just not always consistent.
That's I think speaks to the confidence thing as well, not exactly what you were saying, but that idea of like we have these different environments that we're working in, right? And we're not working directly in prod. You would have to have more than 100% confidence, I think, to do that. But prod is where it runs and other people interact with it. So we have, our dev environment, our staging stuff, and test, and like we do things differently in all those. Like even for small things, you'll have like maybe different databases or different keys to get to like different S3 buckets, or we use S3 everywhere, but local dev and test, stuff like that. And these are things that I think they're basically required or reasonably required, right? So you can develop easily and you don't have to have the same sort of setup, but like, can they eat away at your confidence? Possibly, right? And so this, like, you turned it off in test, and maybe that is the best way to do it. But now this is an example of like, you're testing something that is not the same as what it normally does. I don't mean to call you out for that. It's like I've been there. I continue to be there for like so many things I'm doing because that's just the way it works. And I've also been like one of the clients that we had here, like they had a very intense multi everything set up in production, and for dev it was like very intense multi Docker setup, which was kind of annoying in many ways, but it also helps separate everything. And it's like, well, if in production, something can't access the database directly, but has to go through a socket or make a request, then it has to happen the same way through these virtual machines. You can't just like reach outside your box. But then I can't even express how annoying a lot of that stuff was, and also how it wouldn't work on my M1 laptop, so I had to send it in and get an Intel one instead. So we have a little bit of time. Any other fun stories, questions, thoughts?
I guess I'm kind of curious how the confidence angle, that tests are protecting your confidence in the system, blends with the idea of fragility of tests. How easy it is to get false positives, as it were, in errors, where it says that something is wrong, but it isn't actually wrong, or it's high maintenance. You have to make a lot of changes just to make the test pass, and there's no value added to that. I'm just wondering if people have any thoughts about fragile versus robust tests when it comes to like why that increases your confidence level.
Yeah, the flaky tests are. That's another reason why, Casey, I think that's such a great way to say it, because flaky tests are a confidence killer, a drain, and you're just like, you start to get in this place where you're ignoring builds that are read, either just ignoring them when they're read, or like you start skipping more and more tests and assuming that they're okay, or you just get into this loop of like, I'm going to run this over and over, this whole suite to make this one test pass. And if you have multiple flakes, then you're like, well, this one started passing, but then this one failed. And it becomes a whack-a-mole, which is, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never had a lot of fun playing whack-a-mole. So
I did one time at a birthday party when I was like 8 because I won a bunch of tickets.
yeah. Well, you don't win tickets this way unless
you might win Jira tickets.
Yeah, that's like maybe it is. Maybe the analogy works better than I even expected it to.
Yeah, I have kind of an extremist view on the flaky tests thing, and that is that burn them to the ground, honestly. Like as soon as I see I will not tolerate flakiness within my test suite. If I have any control over the suite in general, if I have any authority to do it, I will delete the whole thing as soon as things get a little flaky, because if there's one test that flakes out, if there are other tests in that same category of tests, like, I mean, if I've got like one integration test that is flaky, and like the size of that suite in that category of test is 1, there's just the one or whatever, like, okay, whatever, that's fine. If it's segregated from like a unit test suite that's doing something different, then like whatever, I can compartmentalize that. But if there's a whole suite of tests that are all the same like category of test, and a couple of them flake out from time to time, and I can't draw a meaningful distinction between those tests and the ones that seem to be a little more stable, just delete them, because what are they doing? They're creating work and they're destroying confidence, and they are turning the deployment pipeline into a lottery system of I got to push this button. It's like a gotcha game on your phone. Like, I got to push the retry button until it allows me to deploy.
It's like a Skinner box.
It
It's
is.
Skinner box deploy pipeline.
Yeah, they are at that point. I mean, exactly what you said previously. They're the opposite of confidence increasers. They're just it's rot in your system. Just destroy them.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna do it. Yusef,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Oh man.
We're gonna go delete like half the tests.
I feel like the problem with several of ours is the wallaby aspect, and not like, well,
I mean, they're
have,
flaky. We've got a
Yeah.
number, like, there's like, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 tests that I just,
Yeah.
speaking of like, just pressing the retry button, like when I go to deploy something, I just sit there and I wait and I'm like, okay, which ones failed this time? Oh yeah, those are known fails. And then
Yeah,
I usually retry 5 times, and each time it's like a 10-minute run. And then after 5 times, I'm like, okay, well, these are consistent flaky failures. I am merging and leaving a note
Yeah.
because I know that these are the ones that usually fail.
yeah, we definitely need to get on that. We'll do some stuff.
Unless it's to prod, then I wait for a clean build.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you can retry, but like it does, it can take a lot of time. This is also why I think this is part of why people really focus on fast builds, because like the faster it is, it really adds up if you have to retry a bunch of things.
Yeah, I'm strictly anti-retry.
Yeah,
Unless the reason for the failure was something outside of your system, like your CI service had an outage or something like that. I am categorically against retry. Delete them. Write down what the intent of those tests was. Like, write it down. Why did we write this test originally? What were we hoping to get from it? Write that down, delete it, and now write it again, but in a way that doesn't fail sometimes. Don't retry.
okay. So
I'm-
one thing that I was thinking is there's that quote that I love, which is like legacy code is code without tests. People talk about legacy as old code. It's like, no, it's better to think of it as code without tests. And then you realize that you can be in the situation where you're like churning out brand new legacy code. Awesome. And I feel like there's something here with like, it doesn't not have tests, but it doesn't have useful tests, or it has like flaky tests, things that make it worse. And like, I mean, in a sense, that is also legacy code, right? Because it doesn't matter if it has tests or not, but it's also like, I don't know, like the whole thing is maddening, and it does, as you were saying, like create more work and drain confidence.
I think it's important to not just define legacy code as bad code, though, and sometimes that
Oh.
ends up happening.
No, that's the thing. Like it's
Okay.
not bad code. It's like it's code that makes things work like more difficult. So like when, in the sense of like when I was doing like consulting last time, we did a lot of like rescue missions and things, and we would, like, if you've ever done a big refactor, and you often have something where like here's a refactor, but it's also doing some things that are wrong, but it's really hard to change behavior and refactor at the same time, because you're like, how do you know that you're doing this correctly? And if it's not tested, like a lot of times when we go in, we would do what we call, I forget actually what they were called, but often we call them currently tests, characterization tests. Yeah. And what we would do is we were using Ruby and RSpec at the time, and we'd have a helper called, instead of like test or it would just say currently in the code. And what it would do is it would create a test, but it would just be a wrapper around that function, that method, but it would add like 3 asterisks, the word currently, all uppercase, and 3 asterisks. So you saw clearly in the code and the output, like this is what it does. We don't necessarily agree with it, but this is what it does. And that would have to be your first pass, right? And that's how like legacy code makes things worse. Like if you want to change this, it's not covered under tests, your choices are forget about it, like delete the whole thing and write it from scratch, or you have to like now do the work that should have been done before to have that scaffold. Because again, like the confidence comes from, you talk about it like it's a high wire act or something. You have like that safety net. And if you, I mean, what would you rather do? Would you rather do like a high wire act without a safety net or with one? And by the way, those are your only 2 choices. Like you can't just say, I want to do it.
My definition of legacy code is code whose dad went to the school and made a big donation. So you got in even though your grades weren't very good.
Yeah. It turns out legacy
the lie,
just like
though?
works in so many ways, just like the whack-a-mole ticket metaphor. Sorry, I cut you off, Max.
Oh no, I was agreeing with Casey. That's all. I also just really love the idea of a currently test helper, because I have definitely,
Yeah, that's
when
great.
going to like work on a bug or something, or just refactor something, and I'm like, okay, I know I want to change this, but right now,
Yeah, it's the
but I don't
easiest
want it
thing.
to be like, no, this isn't the right behavior, but I do need to preserve this for the moment.
Yeah,
And just another word is so helpful.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's like the people are saying kind of reporting like I'm not saying this is right.
Yeah,
People are saying this is right.
yeah. We're almost out of time, but Amanda had a very good question. Of
Yeah,
at what point do you label a test flaky?
that is
And
a good question.
this, I think, the naive answer, sort of like right at the beginning of how much coverage do you want, 100%. The naive answer for me is like, if it is ever not consistent, when it's not like something out of your control, like Casey was saying, like CI just went down or the database backing all of this broke. Like that's an expected difference in behavior where it's failing, but not because of something just like not understandable. This is like, there's just something in the ether, whether it's like random data, yeah, non-determinism. But maybe there's something else, like maybe there needs to be a little bit more to it. So I wonder what anybody else says.
Yeah, sometimes you can tell it's flaky. Like we've got, oh, sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
No, you're good. I think I asked because sometimes it's a user error and sometimes I'll label it, man, this is flaky. Get this out of my way. I'm just going to push that up. And then I don't realize that, hey, maybe I introduced something that is not flaky, but it appears very flaky at first. So it just made me think, like, at what point do we label it as flaky? Because I know sometimes I shoot myself in the foot and I'm quick to throw the test in the garbage can. I don't know. What were you gonna say, Max?
I was gonna say like there are a couple of tests we have that are flaky that are like clearly flaky. Like we use randomized data, but it's I mean like but for like names, so it's from a list of names and it's like a decently long list, but like every now and then the test fails because there's a name collision. And it's like that is flaky because it is not an infinite set of names. They're not like cryptographically random first names. And so like that's flaky for an annoying reason. And then we have other tests that are like, oh, it can't find the element. And now I'm wondering if there's smooth scroll on it. But those are like flaky enough, and we have enough little tests that fail in a similar way independently, like when you first write them, and then kind of not like it's not periodic. That would be much weirder and more terrifying, frankly, if like every sixth time it failed. But like we've looked into them pretty thoroughly. Like Yosef took a chunk of time and like deep dove the flaky tests. A little bit. Okay, well, I don't know. Maybe
entirely
I'm
remember
losing
this,
confidence.
but it sounds like me.
And like we've looked into them pretty hard. And we know that like I hate being like, well, the test is fine because we know it really works, because that's kind of the worst logic. Oh shit, I have a meeting. Okay, bye.
Yeah. All right. That's good. We'll just cut off that thought. It's just tough. We'll follow this up at another
To be
time,
continued.
if for no other reason than to have more fun looking at Backstop and possibly some other similar tools.
It's a huge topic. It definitely warrants many discussions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks for everything. Amanda, thanks for in advance for the editing you have to do on this.
I'm gonna end it right when Max says, "Oh shit, I have a meeting." Boom, end of the Developer Roundtable video.
The JoJo music plays at that point, right?
Yeah. Well, in
Yes.
that case, I'm not even gonna bother saying like and subscribe. Or, oh wait. Till next time.